Hello, lovelies. You're listening to episode 79 of the Broken Enchantments podcast, written and read by Elizabeth Wheatley. That's me. I hope you enjoy this week's episode. Be sure to check out my Patreon for next week's episode, now available. You can check out the links below. Happy listening. Drusilla flinched at his words and began clenching the hilt of her carcatan, as though she were trying to steady herself. But she said nothing. Sword in hand, Armandius didn't wait. He closed the distance between them and hacked at the Lord Argetallam's neck with a savage yell. Everyone scrambled out of the way. Cerilius jerked Janir back, and Argetallam warriors drove the elves, Gwenna, and Carlisle against the wall. The warriors would not risk one of them interfering. The Lord Argetallam blocked, and the clang of metal on metal shook the air. With quick efficiency, Armandius renewed his attack, aiming for the Lord Argetallam's side. Janir's father sprang sideways to avoid the cut and responded by blocking once again. Jamming his sword upwards, the Lord Argetallam caught the lower tip of Armandius's blade against the crossguard and shoved. In the same motion he twisted and struck out with his opposite fist, connecting with the High Lord's mouth. Armandius staggered back. Red stained his lip and chin. Janir gulped. Perhaps Armandius would be more careful now. Whatever the outcome of this match, it would be ill news for her. If Armandius won, he would not hesitate to kill the Lord Argetallam, and that would make Janir the next ruler. While Armandius may not see anything wrong with that, it would probably be a death sentence. If the Lord Argetallam won, he would kill Armandius. Even if she didn't remember most of it, she knew he had loved her as a father should. Armandius was more cautious this time, taking into account his adversary's unexpected swordsmanship. He attacked once again, this time more reserved, gauging, and exploring the extent of the Lord Argetallam's expertise. There wasn't much room for maneuvering in the hall, despite it being a wide and accommodating passage. For all the mention of the gallery, neither man showed much interest in stopping the fight long enough to go there. Every attack Armandius launched was met with equal skill. The swords clashed, glinting and occasionally sparking. There would be moments of pause when both men would stand apart, panting and eyeing one another. Then one of them, usually Armandius, would lunge. The Lord Argetallam blocked most of Armandius's attacks, allowing the other man to tire himself out. Armandius soon realized his opponent's strategy and delivered a hard blow aimed at the Lord Argetallam's shoulder. The Lord Argetallam blocked once again, but this time Armandius did not attempt to withdraw for another blow. He shoved his weight into the sword, driving it closer until the hilts of both weapons locked. The two men strained, pitting brute strength against brute strength. The suspense was nearly palpable. Cerilius squeezed her arms unnecessarily tight. Drusilla's knuckles went white around her carcatan. Lady Gwenna went alarmingly pale. Velasquez and Luana stood side by side, staring as their friend fought for his life. Seovan was rigid, but his gaze kept wandering to Janir, trapped in Cerilius's clutches. Carlisle's wide eyes flitted over the scene like a hummingbird. He didn't seem sure of where to look. Abruptly, Armandius wrenched both swords to his right, knocking the Lord Argetallam to one side. In a dangerous move, Armandius whirled around, momentarily turning his back on his opponent. But the risk proved to be worth it when Armandius's blade tore into the Lord Argetallam's right shoulder. Blood sprinkled the stone as the sword came full circle. The Lord Argetallam shouted, and every Argetallam in that room lost a heartbeat as Armandius's sword came back around. The Lord Argetallam switched the sword to his left hand. Invigorated, Armandius hacked and stabbed, taking advantage of the Lord Argetallam's handicap. Janir watched with a torturous mixture of exhilaration and horror as the Lord Argetallam began to fall back. Armandius snarled and shouted like a lunatic, but he still couldn't seem to break through the other man's defenses. The Lord Argetallam's strategy began to rely almost purely on the defensive as blood seeped down his sleeve and dribbled over his right bracer. Janir had expected to be mourning Armandius, not her father. As the prospect of the Lord Argetallam being slain became more and more real, Janir began to wonder who she truly wanted to win. What was wrong with her? The Lord Argetallam gave off a low curse and gritted his teeth before passing his blade back to his right hand. In spite of his injury, the Lord Argetallam hacked and parried on the offensive, abandoning his earlier tactic in favor of something more straightforward. Armandius adapted quickly, dodging the Lord Argetallam's attacks while at the same time launching his own. The Lord Argetallam was skilled and well-trained, but Armandius had the advantage of being unwounded and the fuel of 18 years' bitter loathing. Unmoving, Drusilla and several of the others hovered with their weapons half-drawn, ready to rush to their lord, command or no. The Lord Argetallam's injury had been a flesh wound, but it was to his bicep. Every motion must be agonizing pain. Still, he didn't repeal his order for his warriors to stay back. Janir's heart beat so fast and hard, it seemed ready to explode. She kept watching as her father and guardian battled, the ferocity of their blows making the air ring with the clash of steel. There was a quick slash, and blood gushed from the Lord Argetallam's face as Armandius's blade sliced into his cheek. That was it. Drusilla's carcatan flew from their sheaths, and she leapt, ready to maul Armandius. At least half the other Argetallams joined her, charging in an instant. No! The Lord Argetallam snarled in spite of his newest wound, dodging as Armandius swung. Stand down. The other Argetallams backed down, if slowly. Drusilla paused. For a moment, Janir didn't think she would obey. But the Mortana's years of unquestioning compliance must have won out. She stepped back, carcatan still drawn. Armandius attacked with the fury of a rabid animal. Janir noticed Velasquez shifted with unease. He whispered something to his sister, and Luana nodded grimly. The fight raged on, and Janir could hardly endure the suspense. Her nerve endings prickled along her back, and her arm had begun to go numb. She was sure that Cerilius had no idea how hard he was gripping her. The Lord Argetallam and Armandius exchanged blows with the intensity of a lightning storm. The echoes of their strikes overlapped, and the reflected light from their blades flashed like fish scales in the lamplight. Armandius swung at a level from his right, meaning to cut the Lord Argetallam's ribs. Janir's father used his bracer to push aside the blade whilst switching the sword to his left hand. With a quick thrust, the Lord Argetallam's blade pierced Armandius's side with the wet ripping of flesh. "Armandius!" Velasquez and Gwenna cried. Gwenna tried to push past them, but Velasquez caught her and pulled her back. "Lord Kierson!" Carlisle shouted. "No!" Janir shrieked, her voice echoing through the hall like the peals of a morning bell. Armandius gasped and dropped his sword, falling against the Lord Argetallam. Janir's father gripped Armandius's shoulder, keeping him upright. They stood locked together, the Lord Argetallam supporting the High Lord. Janir could see most of her father's sword sticking out of Armandius's back, streaked in blood and flashing in the lamplight. "No!" Janir cried, struggling against Cerilius. The Argetallam Mortan held her back, not relinquishing his grip even a little. The Lord Argetallam finally shoved Armandius, ripping his sword free, and the defeated man collapsed to the ground, groaning quietly and muttering incomprehensibly under his breath. Janir's father leveled his blade against Armandius's chest, triumphant. "My lord, please!" Janir screamed. The Lord Argetallam ignored her. "What do you want?" Janir cried. "Tell me what you want." The Lord Argetallam, ever so calmly, lifted his sword away from the wounded High Lord. Armandius tried to right himself, but sank to the floor with a groan. Turning to face her, the Lord Argetallam tossed aside his sword, Ask yourself this question, Janir. The Lord Argetallam came closer. The cut on his cheek was shallower than it first appeared, but bled freely. Red stained his beard and slid down his neck to color the collar of his tunic. The slice on his bicep was deeper, but the bleeding had begun to slow. He came to stand a few paces away. Would he have done the same? Had you asked him to spare me? Janir looked past her father to Armandius. The answer was plain enough. Armandius would never have spared the Lord Argetallam, no matter who had asked. That's different, Janir stammered. Is it? The Lord Argetallam winced as Drusilla examined the cut to his cheek, her calloused hands prodding at the wound. Otherwise he paid her no mind, surveying Janir. Why is that? Because I'm evil. Do you have any idea how many of us that man has tortured, murdered? Janir had no answer. Drop your weapons. The Lord Argetallam ordered the elves. They stood unmoving. Drop your weapons, if you wish to tend your companion. Velasquez's jaw clenched, but he let his swords fall. Luana and Seovan followed suit. At a command from the Lord Argetallam, the gauntlet of Mortons parted, allowing the 3 elves to reach Armandius. Gwenna reached his side before any of them. She knelt in her tattered gown and tried to help him as he attempted to sit up. A moment later, Velasquez was crouched on his other side, examining the wound with Seovan, while Luana told Carael to give them space. Janir pulled against Cerilius, but he held her fast. Then the Lord Argetallam nodded, and the Morton finally released her. Heart racing, Janir ran to them. Would Armandius live? Keep pressure on that, Velasquez ordered Gwenna. The elf had torn a large piece off the hem of Armandius's tunic, ripped it in half, and balled it against both the front and back of the wound. Gwenna held the High Lord's head against her shoulder, and did as the elf commanded. Janir dropped to her knees beside her foster father, but Velasquez waved her back. She would only be in the way. On the ground, Armandius blinked absently. He could go into shock at any moment. Velasquez held the scraps of cloth against Armandius's wound and nodded to his sister. Luana pushed Janir aside, not unkindly, and tore a long strip from the bottom of her own tunic. It was ragged and more than a little stained, but it would have to do. With Seovan's help, they wrapped the cloth around Armandius's waist, holding the makeshift bandages in place. Then the 3 elves laid their hands on Armandius's wound, fingers overlapping. The 3 of them paused a moment, then chanted, in a low, rhythmic tone. They spoke levelly and calmly, in synchronized harmony. The dappled magic within all 3 of them shifted, realigned. It focused around their joined hands, and veins of it crackled into Armandius's body in tendrils. Carael crouched beside Janir, protectively sliding an arm about her shoulders. The glow of magic from beneath the elf's hands, invisible to the naked eye, only seen through Janir's power, turned the color of candlelight on brass. It turned warm, steady. Janir noticed Gannicke gawking out of the corner of her eye. Cerilius still avoided her gaze. The Lord Argetallam conferred with the other Argetallam Janir didn't recognize. She hadn't seen the clean-shaven young Morton arrive, either. The glow subsided as the elves finished, and withdrew their hands. All 3 of them panted, sweat beading their foreheads. Janir touched Seovan's sleeve, and he offered her a half-hearted smile. She opened her mouth, but the words wouldn't come. She was terrified, petrified even. Would Armandius be all right? Could she even hope for such a thing? Her father's sword had run through Armandius's ribcage. How could a man survive that? Will he be all right? Gwenna voiced what Janir couldn't ask. It's the best we can do for now, Luana said softly. Janir worried at her lower lip. She felt she should do something, say something, but her mind went blank. He is strong and stubborn, Velasquez muttered. He will live just to spite your father. Janir looked to the elf. Velasquez's expression was not comforting, nor was it overconfident. Janir didn't find that encouraging. "What in blazes is he doing there?" the Lord Argetallam demanded of the messenger. You have been listening to Broken Enchantments, written and read by Elizabeth Wheatley. Don't forget to check out my Patreon for early access to episodes, bonus content, and lots of patrons-only freebies. You can learn more at elizabethwheatley.com. And don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube. I'll see you next time.